So it seems like suspected politics again in this West Indies team selection process, because Darren Bravo has been excluded despite being the leading run scorer in the recently concluded Regional Super 50 tournament. The reason being that he wasn't selected, according to the West Indies Cricket Board, was that they're preparing for the 2027 World Cup. He was considered, but they decided to go with younger players. Now, to me, that doesn't make any sense. And the reason why it doesn't make any sense is quite simple. You turn around and you say that, and yet you pick Shane Dowrich, who's only played one international in his entire career, and last played an international match in 2020 where he was injured and he bizarrely wasn't selected again for nearly 3 years, which I don't know how or why that happened. It's just bizarre. And Keon Otley, who went on the tour, I believe, to Bangladesh 2 years ago because most of the players didn't want to go because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I have nothing against neither one of those players personally. I do believe Keon Otley had a decent Super 50 tournament, but Darren Bravo deserved to be selected. And once again, suspected political interference is the reason why he wasn't selected. Now, even though they made that statement, you still pick Keon Otley and Shane Dowrich, who are a year and 2 years younger than Darren Bravo, respectively. So, you talking about preparing for the 2027 World Cup doesn't really make any sense. Darren Bravo probably could play in the 2027 World Cup. He'll be 37, 38, depending on where the World Cup is. Why can't he play? Matthew Hayden had an exceptional World Cup in 2007, and he was 37 years old, and he was the top scorer and one of the best players of the tournament. So age is not my number, to be honest with you, and using age as an excuse doesn't make any sense. Darren Bravo is not affecting any other player from not being selected, because right now we're devoid of very good and talented batsmen. And not only that, you do need seniority in a team where you're trying to build around Casey Carty and Alec Atanese, which there is nothing wrong with. But you still need seniority around them in order for them to develop. You can't just put pressure on them like that. And you also name drop those two guys, so now they're under pressure to perform, which is something you don't want. That's the reason why you pick senior players or leaders, because they take the pressure off the young players who could develop and thrive on their own without having to be under that pressure now. So Darren Bravo not being selected didn't make any sense to me. And once again, suspected political interference again. And the reason why I say suspected political interference, despite what they said, is because Darren Bravo does have a history of issues with the West Indies Cricket Board. Back in 2016 or 17, he made a tweet criticizing the then West Indies Cricket Board president, I believe Dave Cameron, because of the contract that he was offered was a C-grade contract. Don't misquote me, I believe that is what it was. And the reason that they gave him that contract was believed, they said his form had dipped or something like that. That was the excuse that they gave. Darren wasn't happy. He made the tweet calling him a big idiot, which is not acceptable. You can't do something like that. So he did deserve some sort of conversations or apology was needed. And Darren, of course, stood his ground. And I believe ever since then, there's been tensions between the cricket board and Darren Bravo. But I do think that this is the reason why our cricket isn't developing the way it is, because when you make mistakes, you're not being forgiven. And other players can make mistakes, other players can be out of form. It can't just be you're selecting certain players to have issues with, though. It has to have a standard. And that's what Dwayne Bravo said, that the selection process must have a proper criteria that everybody needs to be aware of. And I agree. One of them can be form, but one of them also can be fitness, because you do select players who are not fit. And I know just by watching the game on the outside that some of these players aren't fit, and even though they're being selected. But I think that this team overall, I think it's a brittle team. They need a little bit of seniority in it. And not picking Bravo, not picking Ropeman Powell, Puran being unavailable, Jason Holder being unavailable, I think is a bit of vulnerability in the team. And also, there's a lot at stake here with this one-day series. It's not just a simple one-day series, a warm-up series. It's not an associate team you're playing. You're playing one of the best teams in the world, who was formerly a World Cup champion. So I think that when all is said and done, team selection should have been carefully considered a bit more. I don't know if they could still make adjustments to the team. I hope that Bravo could play some part of this one-day series, but I highly doubt it. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on the Darren Bravo situation. I believe it's suspected politics involved. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it isn't. But I'm not saying that there is politics involved. But I suspect that there might be some political interference when it comes to his non-selection. Even though they said they're preparing for the World Cup, they contradicted this by picking two players who really and truly are just 2 years younger than him and a year younger. So I suspect it might be political interference. So let me know what you guys think, man.